Hi, welcome everybody. This is Congressman Brad Schneider, and I hope everyone who's joining us today is both safe and well as we work our way through this crisis. I know that those joining the call, just like everyone else on my team organizing this call, are working day in and day out trying to help our communities. So let me start by saying thank you. Not just thank you for joining us today, but thank you for what you're doing each and every day in our communities. I can't even begin to imagine how hard it is to do what you're doing, but know that we greatly appreciate it and recognize your work. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us on the webinar. This is a webinar on federal resources for nonprofit organizations, and a huge thank you again to everyone for the role you're playing. The roles include helping families find their next meal to assisting the homeless during this national crisis. As you all know firsthand, it's our social safety net that's being pushed to its capacity and driving demand for your help. But the work you're doing is literally holding our communities together. This webinar today is being hosted to connect you with the different federal, state, and local resources that can help your organization weather through this national emergency. I'm going to go first. I'll walk through the different work Congress has been doing to provide the federal government and in turn state and local governments with the resources they need to properly respond to the crisis. Next, we're going to hear from Brian Zaru, Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at Forefront. Forefront is Illinois' statewide organization representing and advocating for nonprofits. Brian will walk us through the different state-level resources available for our nonprofits, as well as discuss the best practices for organizations within our state. Third, we're going to hear from Bo Steiner. Bo is the Illinois District Director for the Small Business Administration, and it's been extremely helpful to us. This is actually the third webinar he has joined us on, so thank you, Bo. Many of the economic stimulus programs that will be of help to your organization are routed through the Small Business Administration, the SBA, and Bo has been an extraordinary resource in getting the word out and how to apply for these programs. As you may know, in early March, we passed the first emergency legislation related to COVID-19. This law included significant funding focused on public health resources. As many of you know, the legislation also included a designation of coronavirus as a disaster under the SBA Disaster Loan Program, for which Illinois nonprofits are eligible. You can apply now for these loans, and these can offer as much as $2 million towards working capital like payroll, rent, and benefits, including an advance of $10,000 within just a couple of days. Later in March, the president signed into law the second emergency legislation related to the virus. Included within this bill were provisions to provide paid medical and family leave for workers directly affected by COVID-19. Businesses with fewer than 500 employees would provide this emergency benefit to workers, and then they would be able to recoup 100% of the cost through a refundable tax credit. I have more guidance on this program on our website, schneider.house.gov, on how you can implement these programs. Finally, 2 weeks ago, on March 27th, the House passed and the President signed into law the CARES Act, a $2 trillion economic stimulus package. This law includes $350 billion in direct funds for small businesses, most significantly under the Paycheck Protection Program. These are loans that can be 100% forgiven if businesses, including nonprofits, retain their employees. Most nonprofit organizations like yours should be eligible for this and other SBA administered programs from the stimulus. So now, before I pass the microphone over to Brian, I want to share some information about charitable COVID-19 funds that are providing grants to social service organizations. If we can go to the next slide. There you go. All right, so the Illinois COVID-19 Response Fund, this is state and local funding, is a $28 million private philanthropy fund. It's funding for nonprofit organizations that provide emergency food and supplies, housing, healthcare services, utility assistance, household expenses, child support or support for children and other vulnerable populations, and assistance for nonprofits for safety and operations. There have been multiple funding rounds. You can apply for this at www.ilcovidresponsefund.org. The next one is the Chicago COVID-19 Community Response Fund. This is a $13.5 million fund supporting not just Chicago, but the collar counties as well. And you can apply for this at www.chicagocovid19responsefund.org. Next slide, please. In Lake County, a similar fund, the Lake County COVID-19 Community Response Fund. So far, $300,000 has been raised from corporations and individuals, and the funds will go to health and human service nonprofits. The website for that is www.liveunitedlakecounty.org//COVID-19. Again, it's www.liveunitedlakecounty.org/COVID-19. There's also a Lake County Community Crisis Relief Fund. This is funding for nonprofit health and human service providers. Applications are being provided on an invitation-only basis. You can contact Lake County Community Foundation with any questions on that. Finally, on this slide, locally, the first one we've seen like this local is Highland Park Community Foundation COVID-19 Emergency Response. This supports nonprofits in the Highland Park and Highwood area. You can reach out directly for questions relating to this fund at https://hpcfil.org. Next slide, please. Finally, for my part, before we go to Brian, the Illinois Humanities COVID-19 Emergency Relief Grants is providing $2,500 general operating grants to Illinois-based humanities and cultural nonprofits with budgets of less than $300,000 located outside the city of Chicago. So arts groups, humanities groups, smaller groups under $300,000 can apply for this at ilhumanities.org/relief grants. And the last one, Arts for Illinois Relief Fund. It's a public-private partnership supporting artists and cultural organizations suffering from COVID-19. These are grants of up to $2,000 for individuals, between $6,000 and $30,000 to organizations. You can apply for that at https://artsforillinois.org. So those are what we are aware of at this point. We'll see if there's other funds. We'll continue to try to keep this information updated on our website, but that's some general state and local funds. Let me turn it over now to Brian Zaru of Forefront, and Brian, we'll leave it to you to discuss the state-related resources for nonprofits. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you very much. My name is Brian Zaru, and I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy here at Forefront. Many of you might know us as the Donors Forum. We changed our name about 5 years ago. Forefront, as the Congressman said, is a statewide association of nonprofits and grant makers. While my job is all policy and advocacy related, we do a large number of things for our membership base, including providing key education to our members. We connect our nonprofits and our funders. We provide all the tools necessary for nonprofits and funders to fulfill their mission. Lately, with the pandemic, we've been on a new road. We've been the key resource for the state in terms of nonprofits and funders for advocacy and throughout the state of Illinois. So we've been very pandemic based the last month. We're going to go over some of the key asks that we've been talking with the members of Congress, state representatives, and we'll go over some of the resources that we have at the state level. One of the many things we have been doing at Forefront is advocating to our federal and state officials on the impact this pandemic has had with nonprofits throughout the state. With the Congressman's help, we have been successful in many key efforts in providing relief, especially in the first 3 packages Washington has put out in terms of COVID relief. And we're currently advocating for more in the 4th package. I know I've been getting this question a lot over the last month now, so there's some items here that we're going to be going over and what we've been advocating for. Some of the aspects, along with our sister organizations throughout the county, throughout the country, I'm sorry, is making sure that nonprofits are involved in any sort of relief effort that comes out of the federal government. We're also currently advocating for nonprofits with more than 500 employees to be eligible for the forgiveness aspect of the Payment Protection Program loan. As you know, we have nonprofits such as the YMCA, Thresholds, nonprofits who do direct service social work. So we're advocating for that as well. We're also fighting for the self-insured nonprofits, and I know this has been a big issue. We had a big survey out, and many people have brought up this issue with the self-insured nonprofits. We're happy with the result we had in the last CARES Act, which provided the states with money to cover 50% of self-insured nonprofits. And we're hoping we're in contact with the state government, and we're also in contact with the federal government to make sure and to hope that the other 50% will be covered as well, because we know that having them on the hook for a large sum could mean the difference between closing their doors when this is all over with. So we know that nonprofits, we're going to be advocating for them at the state level. We're also advocating at the state level to ease the restraints of reporting and monitoring for their state contracts, and adding more flexibility by grant makers. And that's a huge part of Forefront as well. We do have grant makers, and we are in contact with them, with foundations and the private foundations, to try to alleviate the stresses of program dollars, to try to change that into general revenue dollars to keep the doors open. We have put out a survey a few weeks ago, and many of you on the phone call on this webinar probably have answered. We had about 1,400 responses, and many of our asks at the state and federal leaders have been from these responses. So we thank you for adding your input to give me a better understanding of what we should be fighting for, both at the state in Springfield and in Washington. So if you take a look at our website, we are updating it almost twice a day. Sometimes every few hours, we're updating it with more information at myforefront.org, as you see on the screen here. We have links to our webinars, how-tos on the SBA loans, all the policy updates coming out of Washington and Springfield. All of the different funds throughout the state are set up, and I'll go over them in a second. And we also link to our sister organizations who have just given us very, very valuable information. Our goal at Forefront is to make this information as streamlined as possible and to help all of our nonprofits throughout the state. So you'll see some more updates later this week. We just had a big phone call this morning with about 100 funders, both public and private foundations. We had our state treasurer, Michael Ferrix, on the phone as well to discuss all his office is doing to help small businesses and nonprofits throughout the state. He told us this morning that there will be a fund, some sort of relief fund by the state treasurer's office. Once we get the exact details on that, we'll put that on our website, and I'll share it with the congressman's office as well. And they also have the charitable trust fund, which people can apply. Nonprofits with $1 million budget or less can apply up to $25,000 for a grant. So the information is extremely valuable on the site, and we're doing everything we can to help our nonprofits through this pandemic. I'm available by email if anyone has any questions. I think Greg has it posted here. And I want to thank the Congressman for giving me the time. And in this time, I just want to go over some of the statewide funds. I know the Congressman he mentioned some of these, but if you go to our website, I think on the next slide I have it there. If you click on, oh, maybe it's not on this part. I'm sorry. So anyway, right under this slide here, once you go to the website, you'll see our website, which is separated. We have almost 30 different counties here that have different funds. So you have Champaign, Decatur, DuPage County, Edmonton, Freeport, Fox Valley, Grundy County, Lake County, Nottingham, Warren, Morton, Quad Cities, Oak Park, Springfield, and Will County. Each of these has a fund. We also have it separated by who's accepting applications and when. So you have the Archdiocese of Chicago, the Chicago Community Trust and United Way, community foundations all across the state have some of their own funds, and you can find that all with links on our website to get exactly what you need. In closing, I want to thank the Congressman for his time, and thank you for having me on here. And like I said, if you have any questions, please reach out.
Great, Brian, thank you so much. Appreciate all you're doing, and we can get the links to everybody as well. Let me now turn it over to Bo Steiner to discuss the SBA resources for nonprofits.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Bo Steiner. I am the district director for the Illinois district of the Small Business Administration, and I look forward to sharing a little bit about the primary program that's available for nonprofits right now, the Paycheck Protection Program. So if we go to the next slide, that'd be awesome. Next slide. So SBA, in partnership with the Treasury, is responsible for delivery of this program, which is a up to $10 million forgivable loan for eligible small businesses and nonprofits. On the nonprofit side, what are called out as eligible are 501c3s and 501c19 veterans organizations. Basically, the gist of the program is that you look at your average monthly payroll, a 12-month look back, and using that average monthly payroll and payroll expense, I should clarify, determine times a multiple of 2.5 determines your loan amount you are eligible for. In essence, the intent is that it gets you through approximately 8 weeks of payroll given your average monthly payroll. This is a loan fully guaranteed by the federal government, and it's made through a lender of a private sector lender. So you would go to a lender to apply for this program. The key kind of metrics for it are twofold. One is from a funding standpoint, once the funding that you receive, in order to receive 100% forgiveness of that loan, at least 75% needs to be used for payroll. There are other eligible uses of this loan, including rent, mortgage interest, utilities, but the primary focus of the program is on payroll and payroll expenses. The second qualifier, in addition to 75%, is your full-time equivalent headcount levels. So looking for you as the borrower to maintain your headcount. We don't have the exact calculations right now on what it looks like if, say, your head count reduces some amount and or you don't fully apply 75% of the proceeds for payroll or payroll related expenses, but that should be forthcoming. Next slide, please. Next slide. So again, you can apply through any existing SBA 7A lender, through any federally insured depository institution, or federally insured credit union and farm credit institution that is participating. In addition, we are rapidly expanding the number of lenders that support the program. They have a streamlined participation agreement process where they can get access very quickly to get into the system. And lenders actually began taking applications April 3rd, 2020. The last date you can apply for the PPP, as we call it, is June 30th, 2020. Next slide. Okay, so if you are interested, you think you're eligible and you want to apply, a couple things that you need to do. Number one, I would recommend that you pull down the application from the SBA website. You can find that at sba.gov/coronavirus. You'll see that it's basically a 2-page application with a lot of details written on the 3rd page to help you understand what you need to provide. Essentially, what you're going to be pulling are payroll records for the prior 12 months. So that could be either a 12-month look back from now, or it could be looking at your 2019 payroll and payroll expenses. I want to clarify too, when you look at your payroll expenses, it's not just cash compensation, it's other benefits that you may provide, the expenses related to other benefits you may provide to your employees. That includes things like healthcare benefits, retirement contributions, paid sick leave, all those sorts of things would be included in those payroll and payroll expenses. A full list can be found on the interim final rule, which we also found on our website at the same place. As I mentioned, you take the average monthly payroll, multiply it times 2.5, and then that would define your maximum loan amount. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the approved use of proceeds, things that they can be used again is payroll costs, costs related to continuation of group health care benefits during periods of paid sick, medical or family leave, insurance premiums, basically those ancillary benefits that you provide to your employees, as well as the cash compensation. mortgage interest payments, rent payments, utility payments, interest payments on any other debt obligations incurred before February 15th. So a lot of different uses of proceeds that are eligible. But what I would like to make sure you take away from this is that 75% applies to the payroll costs and payroll related expenses. So it's really important to note that's what's going to determine your forgiveness. So I like to kind of walk through the whole process so people understand what happens from A to Z. So you would, if you are interested in applying, you pull your payroll records, your other payroll expense records together. You determine what your monthly costs are. You reach out to your bank and you touch base with them and you identify what their process is.
Where was that extension for some?
Some banks have actually created their own portals. So you would go in and it's an electronic portal, or maybe they take the paper documentation, but you're going to want to find out from your bank that you're going to, or lender that you're going to work with. You submit your application, at which point the bank does their diligence, basically verifying that you provided payroll information that supports your application. They send that to SBA. We approve it at SBA as long as everything's there and appropriate. The bank receives the authorization, at which point they will make an initial disbursement or full disbursement, depending on what you've agreed to as part of that process. 7 weeks from that point of disbursement, you will likely re-engage with your bank and they'll ask for additional documentation to basically assess the use of funds for that loan. So that's how they're looking at you to provide evidence that you spend at least 75% of the funds on payroll and payroll expenses from a forgiveness standpoint. In addition, that the overall use of proceeds was appropriate per the rules of the program. Assuming you provide that, more than 75% payroll expenses, headcount remains consistent with what you put in your application, that documentation will go back to the SBA to apply for forgiveness. Once that's approved, the U.S. Treasury on your behalf pays off that loan with the bank, and you walk away and you have no more debt obligation, or that basically that loan is erased. If you don't receive 100% forgiveness, then any remaining funds or remaining amount of that disbursement would then would basically continue on as a loan with a 2-year term at 1% from the date of initial disbursement. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell. There's no collateral requirements. There's no personal guarantee. And again, I want everybody to be really clear on this. This is based on your historical payroll. It is not based on a credit analysis or anything like that, solely based on payroll history. So next slide. All right, so if you are going through this process, we always recommend that if you're having difficulties or trying to figure out how to navigate it, reach out to a Small Business Development Center, SCORE, or Women's Business Center. They can provide insight into the application process and help you with that. You can find a location at sba.gov/local assistance. Next slide. And again, the latest and greatest information about SBA programs can be found at sba.gov/coronavirus. You can also go to sba.gov/disaster, a lot of good information there. For the Illinois District Office, if you want to send us an email, you need some assistance, the best way to get in touch with us is at illinois.do@sba.gov. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Congressman.
Bo, thank you. That was great. Thanks so much, both to Bo and Brian. Let's now go to questions. We've got some questions that people sent with their RSVP, so we'll start there, but we'll also take questions as they come in. The first question is from James from CCDC in Glenview. What happens with unemployment claims by employees which are charged back to the nonprofit organization? Great question. Under the CARES Act, there's a 50% federal match for UI claims by nonprofits. IDES, Illinois Department of Employment Security, is still working through guidance for nonprofits, and we'll send that information out as soon as we have it. Bo or Brian, do you have anything you want to add?
Open tomorrow? Yeah.
Pretty much everything that you said, Congressman. So the federal government requires the state to pay 50%. We are working to advocate for the state to up that, hopefully, and then we're also working with the federal government to see if they would cover the other half. So we're working.
Great, thank you. I think we have some callers. If you're not Bo or Brian, if you're not on mute, if I can ask everyone to put their phone or computer on mute, we're getting some background noise, but thank you for that. The next question is Ken from Adelante Center for Entrepreneurship in Waukegan. Any guidance on how applications will be evaluated for nonprofits that show an inconsistent revenue stream because they rely on grants for funding? Bo, I'm going to throw this to you, but I think it's really a function of employee and headcount, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it's solely a function of your payroll. They're not looking at revenue stream at all. It's just based on your historical payroll, 12-month look back. Again, there are some other caveats on that, other ways that can be calculated. And I would refer to the Treasury released FAQ 2 days ago, but generally speaking, you're looking at that 12 months of payroll and payroll expense.
Great, thank you. Margaret from Mundelein Park and Recreation District asked, as a government agency, do we qualify for any resources? Margaret, at present, and Bo may have some other guidance from SBA, but within the letter of the law, not yet. I'm advocating for local governments to get more funding in the next iteration of legislation. We've done the 3 bills in March. We're going to do it looks like an update on the CARES Act, call it CARES 1.1, before getting to CARES 2.0, which should come out in the next couple of weeks, I would imagine. I've written both to Speaker Pelosi as well as Governor Pritzker about this issue, advocating for local agencies to be able to have access to funding. Bo, do you have anything about SBA resources that would be available to government agencies?
We do not generally have any resources, no.
Okay. Carolyn from Highwood Chamber of Commerce, what can local chambers do to assist local businesses with the application process for the various federal and state programs? Is there a service provided to assist businesses with the process and knowing whether they are eligible? Well, first of all, the most important thing that chambers can and have been doing, so thank you for this, is helping us get the word out about these programs to your members. We rely on you to make sure that all businesses are aware of everything that's available, and the chambers have been really doing an amazing job. So again, thank you. The other piece I'll say is that the chambers have the ability to be our eyes and ears. You're talking to your members. If you hear anything, any concerns we should be aware of, please let us know as soon as possible. Brian or Bo, anything from your perspective on what chambers can do, or how we can help chambers?
Yeah, so from the standpoint of eligibility for the program, generally speaking, that would be something that the bank's going to go through as they look at their due diligence for the process. Certainly, chambers can get familiar with the eligibility requirements for that. All of the eligibility requirements for the PPP program are on our website, so definitely encourage people to look at the various eligibility constraints around the program.
Great. The next question is from Stephen online. He's got a question for you, Brian. Can you expand on what the state of Illinois has, what funding mechanisms they have in place offering $25,000 grants that you mentioned for nonprofit organizations with an operating budget below $1 million?
Yeah, so this exists even prior to the pandemic. The state treasurer's office has a charitable trust grant up to $25,000 for nonprofits with $1 million or less budget. They've always had this, but they have 3 different types of categories. So you have to fit in the food programs categories, and that talks about food pantries, snacks, summer feeding programs, and then they have the housing category, and they have the workforce and economic development. If you go to their website, illinoistreasurer.gov, they do have those, but they are also opening up another sort of grant. They haven't given the details yet, but once I get it, I can share it with the Congressman's office.
Great, thanks, Brian. Carolina from Waukegan Public Schools asks, I believe our district will receive a significant amount of funds to provide technology due to remote learning needs. Does this include providing Wi-Fi for families in need? If not, are there funds that nonprofits can access to assist with providing Wi-Fi? Carolina, this is a huge issue. We've been talking about it on a number of our congressional caucus calls. We're seeing this not just in our communities, but communities across the country. The CARES Act included funding for expanded educational resources for remote learning, but we're aware that the access to the internet is a major problem for many of these families. We're looking at providing more resources and trying to press the providers to get internet into various places. Different localities are taking extraordinary measures, such as taking unused school buses that aren't running the routes anymore and trying to set them up as hotspots in neighborhoods. But really, this is a much broader issue of closing this digital divide, which we hope to make significant progress on. But in the meantime, we've got to get access to the internet, because that's how these schools are communicating with their students right now. So we're very much focused on it. Brian, are there any state-specific resources that would be available to communities for supporting access to the internet?
This is something that we've been talking about with our funders, and privately, the private philanthropy is trying to help with this, but I'm also advocating at the federal level to try to close that divide.
Consider me a partner, Brian. But yeah, Carolina, we are pushing on that. Sally online asks, can we apply for an economic injury loan if we also applied for the PPP loans? My understanding is that you can do that, correct, Bo?
Yes, that's right. So the key element to consider regarding PPP and EIDL is that you're using the proceeds for different purposes. So if the PPP is primarily intended towards payroll and you receive an economic injury disaster loan that's you're using as working capital for other stuff that you need to run your business day to day, then that is an appropriate instance where you can have access to both programs.
Great, thank you. Richard from the Illinois Society of Eye Physicians and Surgeons. My understanding is that 501c6 nonprofits are not included in the CARES Act provisions. This is a major problem. He did not emphasize that. I will emphasize this is a major problem since we depend on dues from our members. So I understand that most of them are idle now. Paying dues is likely the last thing on their mind. Richard, I agree. The 501c6 organizations were excluded from the CARES Act, the PPP program. They are eligible for tax credit provisions and for economic injury disaster loan programs. I can tell you we pressed to have them included in the first round of the CARES Act. By the time it came from the Senate, that wasn't there. We hope to get that addressed. I've heard from a significant number of these 501c6 groups, including chambers of commerce, trade associations, etc., and hopefully we'll pick that up. Bo, is there anything I'm missing with respect to these 501c6 organizations?
No, what you stated is my understanding as well.
All right, and Brian, are the resources that Forefront's aware of that might be helpful?
So what you mentioned, we have on our website. We don't represent the trades or the C6s, but I'm in contact with their lobbyists, and I know they're fighting to try to get included in the fourth package. But if you go to our website, the C6s can go to our website and look at the economic disaster relief programs, and it does have a lot of information there for them as well. All
right, Bo, I'm going to throw this question to you. I had it on another call yesterday as well. If a company, this is from Stan Online, if a nonprofit or company hires someone mid-year, so let's say August of 2019, how do you calculate the average payroll if they were only on payroll for 5 months of the 12 months last year?
Sure. So the general payroll calculation, again, is going to be based on the average 12-month payroll. So you would take your aggregate 12-month payroll and payroll expense, added together, divided by 12. Recognize that doesn't account for somebody that, the full costs of that particular company in the loan. There are some other ways to calculate your average monthly payroll, which are in this FAQ that Treasury put out, but it's It's not complicated, but there's just different options. So I will make sure that the Congressman's office has that FAQ, and we can call out that specific area so that you can take a look at it and see if there might be a different way to calculate the average monthly payroll that would fit better for your particular business situation.
Great, thank you. And I want to make sure that people on the call know you guys are not alone. We're working on your behalf, but also a lot of folks. We have almost 200 people on this call, just to give you a sense of the scale. The next question is from Georgia from Phoenix Family Health Center in Highwood. We are a frontline medical clinic that needs funding to stay open and continue to serve the uninsured and underinsured in Lake County. What is our best way to get emergency funding to keep our doors open? Boss, I'll start with you. You talk about how these institutions can apply for SBA resources.
Sure. So I think the biggest program that can help, because most organizations, one of their biggest cost drivers is their payroll, would be the PPP. So in that, for the Paycheck Protection Program, I would highly recommend that you contact your current bank and talk to them about applying for that program. If they do, because you apply through a bank or other lender that's participating in the program. If they are not participating, you can go to SBA's website. We have a PPP Lender Finder, and you can put in your zip code, and it'll give you local entities around you that provide that program. Assume as a nonprofit, you would also be eligible, and my understanding is we're still accepting application, I know we're still accepting application for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan program. So that is a program you could apply for through the SBA directly. You go to our website, and the intent is that those proceeds are used for working capital needs. So that could be anything from, it could include payroll, but it could also include other ongoing utilities, other things that you need to pay to keep the lights on and the organization moving. So you can still apply for that. The one thing I would say is that the funding levels for the PPP are the greatest. So, encourage you to take advantage of that, because that's probably going to be the biggest bang for your buck, but it certainly can apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan program as well.
Great, thank you. Brian, anything you want to add?
Honestly, what Bo just said is kind of sums it up.
All right, great. Georgia, I'm going to have my team reach out to you directly as well. There's other things, especially when we get to healthcare. We've been trying to press the administration to open up the ACA exchanges to give more people access. So many people are losing their healthcare if they lose their jobs. So we'll reach out directly as well. But thank you for the question. Next question's an online question from John. Is payroll protection available for 501c3s with more than 500 employees? Again, my understanding is it's a 500 limit cap, but Bo, am I missing anything?
So actually, for nonprofits, there is no size limit on the size of the organization from a personnel standpoint. However, you would still be limited to the $10 million maximum amount of the loan.
Got it. Okay, so it's the loan cap is the same, but for the employee size, they don't have that.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Chris from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Glenview asks, are religious organizations eligible for PPP loans, economic injury, disaster loans? Sally, similarly online, asks, can you clarify which of these opportunities apply for faith-based institutions? So, Bo, do you want to touch on that one?
Yes. So, generally speaking, yes, religious organizations are eligible for both the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and the Paycheck program. I would refer you to a notice that was placed on the SBA website, which specifically addresses that topic to review further. But again, generally speaking, yes.
Great, thank you. And I'll share that there is a SBA handout attached with frequently asked questions for religious organizations that's attached to the webinar document, and we'll send it out following this this webinar. The next question is an online question from Philip. Will we need to rehire any or all furloughed workers with PPP loan funds? Bo, can you explain how it works that if company has laid off workers, applies for, receives a loan, what they do with bringing their workers back?
Sure. So basically when you make application, you're going to be providing your headcount level. My understanding is it's your average monthly full-time equivalent headcount level. So once you receive the loan, then the expectation is that you will either maintain your headcount or you will rehire those people that maybe you've had to lay off because of the shortfall and very quickly rehire people. So if you want to apply for the PPP and be eligible for forgiveness for that loan, you will have to do two things. Two criteria. One is that you are using at least 75% of those funds on payroll and or payroll expenses. And number two is that you're maintaining your full-time equivalent headcount. And you'll have to provide evidence that you have people on staff during for the duration of the time up to when you work with your bank for forgiveness.
Great. Thank you. Ann online says not all SBA lenders are ready to process the Payroll Protection Program applications. Is there concern that funding will be depleted before all banks are ready to process the applications? And the one thing I'll touch, I know what Congress intended to do and what the spirit and intent was of the law. I will say we are very much aware that there were some problems with the rollout last week. This is moving very quickly, and I think we're working also very quickly to close those gaps. But there are also some structural problems, and one of which is we allocated $359 billion in the CARES Act. We would have liked more. We fought for more. We weren't able to get that in negotiations with the administration. There is now discussions to increase the $349 billion by $251 billion to bring it to around $600 billion, which is just it's a large number. It's a mind-blowing number. So we're working to expand that. So again, we're telling everyone to apply with some urgency. The sooner you get in, the sooner you are going to be processed. But we're trying to make sure that we do not run out of funds as well. Bo, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Debbie from North Shore YMCA. We're especially interested in your thoughts on the second relief bill for small businesses and nonprofits that will treat self-funded nonprofits fairly by increasing the federal unemployment insurance reimbursement for self-funded nonprofits to 100% of costs. As currently written, Section 2103 of the CARES Act will subject nonprofits throughout the country to crippling payments to their state unemployment systems later this year, while other employers will likely have little or no additional cost from these layoffs. Debbie, I hear what you're saying, that the CARES Act enacted a 50% federal share of this cost for nonprofit related unemployment claims. We're working to get better guidance and also provide more assistance as well. Brian, you mentioned Forefront's working to cover the other 50%.
Yeah, we're working right now. We're currently talking to Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth to try to put that ask in the new bill to get the other 50% covered, because I've had conversations with the state. They can go past the 50% if they chose to. So we're also working with state government to see if they can go past the 50% mark.
Great, thank you. Next question from Catherine, I'm sorry. Is there a list of financial organizations that are accepting applications? Some say they're closed and not taking any more applications. Catherine, there is a list, a couple places. One is the Illinois SBA District Office website. You can get a list of vendors. If you Google Illinois SBA Office and click on the first link, and from there click the Illinois Resource Guide, it includes a list on pages 29 to 32. It's also on the SBA.gov website. And Bo, you may have something to add there as well.
Yeah, I think the key is to go to SBA's website, again, at the sba.gov/coronavirus, where you can find a PPP Lender Portal or Lender Finder, I'm sorry, where you can put in your local information and, oh, there it is. You put your zip code in and it will show you the local lenders that are supporting the program.
Great. Thanks. Sean online asks, if we furloughed employees prior to applying for our PPP loan and we reinstate them at the time we receive the loan proceeds, will we still be eligible for loan forgiveness? So it's a timing question. At what point do you have to bring back furloughed employees to still qualify for forgiveness?
Sorry.
Were you going to go, Brian, or do you?
Yeah, if my understanding is correct, you either have to hire the employees back or be at the level of which you applied by June 30th. Did I have that right, Bo?
I think it's not entirely clear in the interim final rule. The key is, from a I think the way it says it is to rehire quickly.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect. So it's not specific, but just note that to be offered forgiveness, and you're going to have to work with your bank on that. There's that 75% threshold. And then what I would do is I would talk to my bank when I'm going through the lending process and see how they're going to look at what you need to provide from the standpoint of your headcount information that they're going to need to support the forgiveness process.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to pick up on something, Bo, you said that's also important. The guidelines that are coming from the administration are still interim guidelines. These are not final guidelines, and we continue to push for more clarity and clearance. When I say we, I think it's everybody. It's me, it's Bo, it's everybody else trying to get that guidance. So some of these things are still moving targets, but for the most part, I think you have the clarity. Certainly time to apply for the loan applications. Kyla from Bits and Bytes Cybersecurity Education Corp in Deerfield. How can we make up for lost income? Generally, are there grant options available for nonprofit activities? Brian, are there best practices for how these organizations can make up for lost income and access grants during this time?
Yeah, so there's two things that we're doing. The first one is if you go to our website, I believe we have webinars up, and we're going to be having webinars on how you can make up for lost income through virtual means, through different sorts of summits, to do everything a lot more digital. The second part of that is that we are working with funders to work on a mechanism where we can make the program dollars that you originally received and to have leniency on those to make them more into general revenue proceeds rather than program dollars. So that's something that we're working on as well.
Okay, and the website's myforefront.org.
Yep.
Great. Bo, how about for the PPP or EIDL loans? Are there restrictions on the use of funds?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest things that you'll find with both the EIDL and the PPP is, they're not intended to refinance other debt, except in very limited circumstances. So, especially from the EIDL, right, it's for working capital needs. So you can't buy new equipment, you can't buy a building, those sorts of things. From a PPP loan, you are limited to payroll, rent, mortgage interest, utilities are what are called out in the rule.
All right, great, thank you. And Bo, I'm going to confess I'm not sure the answer to the next question. Ronaldo online asks, can the PPP loans be applied to salaries that are covered in part by state grants?
I do not know the answer to that question. When you have you almost might be looking at kind of a duplication of some kind of benefit. Not that it's a benefit, but yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
All right, so Brian or Renato, let me suggest this, and again, it's on the screen. Our website, our email address, our phone. Drop us a note, and we'll try to get an answer to that. But again, there's so many different scenarios that we will try to get an answer to that. Catherine asks, what response do you have to the reports that the large banks are prioritizing their applications with largest customers first and smallest customers last? Catherine, I've heard this from a number of places. Our goal is, and we put in guardrails and safety mechanisms to have the oversight, to hold the SBA accountable for administering the program transparently and fairly. And so I'll be focusing on this. there is the issue of banks have said that they're processing their clients first before taking on new clients or new customers, and we're working on addressing that as well. But the most important thing is if we have that transparency, hopefully we can avoid situations like what you're talking about. Bo, do you have thoughts on this that you want to add?
No, I mean, I think you mentioned it, Congressman. This is a massive program that's being implemented very quickly. So the banks, along with SBA, we're all working very hard to make sure that we have capacity, that we can serve as many business owners as possible. So I can attest that, the many lenders that I speak with are trying to do as much as they can to help the small business community. So stay persistent would be my #1 recommendation. Keep pressing to identify a lender, whether your existing lender or some other lender, because things are changing constantly. We are introducing additional lenders to the network that's supporting PPP. So definitely don't give up. Keep persisting in your efforts to apply for this program.
Absolutely, and I'll also add that as Treasury has asked for this additional funding, $250 billion. One of the things that we have pushed for in the House, and I'll continue to advocate for, is more of the additional money getting to our community banks or local banks to help as well. Andrea from the fraternity and sororities, why are 501c7 organizations not yet included in the CARES Act for the Paycheck Protection Program? Do you anticipate these nonprofits being added for eligibility? I think I don't have a short answer, Andrea, is why not? I think the second half of the question, though, do we anticipate? Our goal is trying to push this out as far and wide as we can get it. And the answer may be it wasn't included because it was just missed. I don't think there was anything intentional. I don't know if there was anything intentional, but our goal is to fix the things we missed, either with CARES 1.1, this update, additional funds, or in CARES 2.0, the next bill. Bo, anything else, or Brian, anything else on 501c7s?
To be honest, no, we don't deal with too many of them, and I don't know why they weren't included. I'm not sure.
Okay. Andrea, a different Andrea online asked, do we know if the EIDL loan is applicable to 501c3 organizations? We applied over 10 days ago. Bo, do you have an answer on that one as far as application?
Yes, so 501c3s are eligible for the EIDL. My understanding is that those applications are being processed, and from the standpoint of the EIDL advance, those disbursements should start coming within days.
Okay, great. And Andrea, you're not alone. We've heard this question as well. The goal was to get them out quickly. I just think the system is being so overwhelmed that quickly takes on different meanings for as you get through the process. Junaid from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Zion asks, how can faith-based communities be actively involved in supporting our communities during this epidemic? Thanks for the question. It's a really important question. I consistently say, and I've had calls with different nonprofits, I think I said in the beginning of this call, it is our nonprofits and the various organizations like yours that is going to be critical in holding together the fabric of our communities. So some of the things that people can do is looking out for their neighbors, taking care of people who live alone or are shut in, looking for people who are struggling, individuals who are supporting our food banks, volunteering for Meals on Wheels, donating blood are again part of the story of the heroes of this crisis. And I know that the food banks are staying open. We're trying to get more funding for them. The other thing I'll say to every organization now, and I imagine this is going to carry on long past the emergency phase of this crisis, is the promotion of social distancing and simple things like washing your hands for 20 seconds, just encouraging all your members to follow your CDC recommendations. Brian, thoughts on how faith-based communities can help in supporting communities?
I think that, like you said, Congressman, the best way is social distancing. I think pretty soon, hopefully, we'll see the curve flatten over the next few weeks in Illinois, and the best way to do that is social distancing. So that's one of the best ways we can do it.
All right, great. We're getting to the ends of the hour. I think we've got time for 2 more questions. Claude online says, I'm a personal trainer and president of my business and the only worker. Do I meet the criteria to be available for these programs? The simple and short answer is yes. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, qualify self-employed. You can apply for PPP either as a sole proprietorship or as an independent contractor. Lenders are able to start accepting applications from such entities beginning tomorrow. If you visit sba.gov/PPP, you'll see the list of those lenders again. Bo, anything else on when you're the only worker in your business?
No, Congressman, you nailed it.
Okay. Thank you. Last question is from Matthew from Grace Lutheran in Libertyville. All of our employees are not covered under standard unemployment insurance as we do not pay in. Will clergy and lay staff still be covered in case of layoffs? Are SBA loans available for other purposes than paycheck protection? What are the terms? Bo, how does this apply to clergy and lay staff of a church like Grace Lutheran?
I don't know the specifics of kind of how things are organized. A religious institution is eligible to apply for a PPP for their employees, but again, I don't know how things are structured within that framework.
Yeah, and I apologize because he was asking unemployment insurance, so that's not an SBA issue.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, so and that was my mistake. So I think from unemployment insurance, Matthew, I'm sorry, I don't have a direct answer. We'll get back to you on that, how it applies for clergy on that. And with that, let me just say thank you to everybody for joining us. I want to in particular thank both Bo and Brian for your insights today. I can't tell you how much personally I appreciate your service both today and every day as we're going through this crisis. You guys are truly at the front lines. Just as a follow-up, everyone on the call today will receive an email with the handouts we mentioned. That includes the SBA handout of frequently asked questions for religious organizations, the Illinois Charitable Trust Grant, and a PDF of today's presentation. In addition, we are posting a video recording of today's presentation on both our YouTube and Facebook pages. And before we go, if you do have any questions or need casework assistance for a federal issue, please contact my office. Like I said, we're working remotely, but we're working for you full time. We are available at 847-383-4870. And that takes us to the end of the hour. Again, please stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy. Together, we're going to get through this. And anything we can do for you, please let us know. Brian and Bo, thanks again. Have a great weekend. Those celebrating Passover, happy Passover. Those observing Easter, Good Friday and Easter this weekend, wishing you a happy holiday as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.